Those of us who aren't wealthy may only be peripherally aware of the fine and rare wine auction market, but it is big business. Live and online wine auctions earned a total of 524 million in 2022 alone. Rudy Kurniawan, I cannot pronounce his name, saw an opportunity in the industry and he took it, making millions of dollars selling counterfeit wine to some of the richest and worst people in the United States. Today, we're talking about defrauding the rich, the importance of government regulations, and the documentary Sour Grapes. You're listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with Rachael and Roxanne.
Hi, Rachel. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
This whole documentary reminded me of Frasier and Niles. I laughed through the whole thing. It just got stupider and stupider, and I couldn't look away. And I was so glad that you suggested this for this week. That's great. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, this not only did this remind me of Frasier and Niles, but in this most current season of The Simpsons, one of the episodes was based on this exact situation, but they made it so that Homer and Marge and Waylon Smithers had accidentally stumbled into counterfeiting wine on the fine wine market. And it was very clearly based on this situation. Having watched that episode first and then seen the documentary, now I have to go back and rewatch that episode.
Oh, that's great. I mean, in the interest of full disclosure, I cannot tell a bottle of 92 Rothschild Lafite from a bottle of Thunderbird that was made last week. I, I, I am not an audiophile. I don't know anything about wine. So there we go.
And as long as we're putting full disclosure out there, I do not drink. So none of this matters to me, even a whit, as far as like flavors of the wine. And at one point, one guy is describing a bottle of wine's flavor, and he's like, it's almost like a BLT if you put an egg on top. It's almost that flavor. And I was like, you are bullshitting. Oh my God, that is not what that tastes like. It tastes like fire and vinegar at best. That's what you're getting.
Yeah, no, I don't know what kind of BLTs this guy's eating, but it's clearly not a traditional one.
Yes. But this documentary was made in 2016. And in 2016, that was the year that David Bowie passed away on January 10th of that year. That was the year Barack Obama visited Cuba, marking the first time a sitting U.S. president had visited the island since President Calvin Coolidge in 1928. That was also the year that Egypt Air Flight 804 crashed into the Mediterranean Sea and killed all 66 people on board. And then that was the year that the Chicago Cubs won the World Series for the first time since 1908. And I mean,
fascinating.
Other things also happened that year, but we're not talking about those other things. So
yeah.
But yeah, so this documentary, it's called Sour Grapes, and it is about one guy, and kind of you find out that he's got some people kind of around the world helping him a little bit, but he creates counterfeit wine and ingratiates himself in the community of super wealthy wine buyers to the point where he is making like tens of millions, maybe even upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars selling fake wine. But yeah, so this one started giving us a tour of a vineyard in Burgundy, France, which was just absolutely lovely.
If you watch this documentary, those of you who speak French will notice a definite discrepancy between what Laurent Paulson says and what the translation is. They get the gist of it, but it's not a very literal translation. If you don't speak French, don't worry about it. Just go with the closed captions. But if you do speak French, you'll notice a little discrepancy. But it certainly doesn't take anything away from the accuracy of what he says. So
good, but I don't speak French, so I have to trust the captions. But we're getting a tour of a vineyard with Laurent Poisson, uh,
Also,
who is a winemaker who owns this vineyard. And he was born into the industry, his parents and his grandparents, and they had all been making wine in France forever. He joked about how it's not that there's wine in his blood, it's that there's blood in his wine.
God.
But yeah, so we open with kind of this beginnings of the industry, and then they take us to a wine auction in San Francisco selling bottles of wine, and we're watching them go for like 10, 11, $12,000 a bottle, which is just absolutely shocking to me.
It's absurd. I've never even bought a new car that costs that much money. I just don't.
Well, and the only time I ever buy wine is when I'm making beef stew, because I have a beef stew recipe that uses wine. And I always go in and I'm like, can I have your $8 bottle of wine? Like, it does not need to be complex. It does not need, I just need it for cooking purposes.
Just get some cooking wine. There you go. Right.
Yeah. So
Oh,
for me, every time I go in, I'm like, yes, this is red and it smells like red wine. This will clearly do. It doesn't matter if it's, like
right.
Merlot versus Shiraz or what. None of that matters to me. Could not.
I wouldn't know either.
Uh, but apparently, these people do, and it's big business. And as part of the documentary, we're watching them kind of as a bird's eye view over the tasting, over the like dozens of people sitting at tables. And I was appalled that they're taking tiny sips of wine and swishing it and then spitting it out. And I'm like, why are you wasting? That's a $10,000 bottle of wine. What are you doing?
Exactly. This is a world I can't comprehend. I just can't. I mean, the $10,000 wine alone blows my little brain. But seeing the wine tasting, they looked like a bunch of like chronic alcoholics who kept getting sick and then then drinking some more. I was just like, my God, there's a whole side to this life that I just don't know about.
I cannot imagine having so much money that I spend it to swish a flavor around in my mouth, not even to swallow it. And you're missing some of the flavor and the notes when you don't swallow it because you have taste buds that go down your tongue into the back of your throat.
Sure,
So,
sure.
so they're just like some of my taste buds for $10,000. Some of my taste buds will
Right.
enjoy this.
That would be like putting a Reese's peanut butter cup in your mouth and masticating it with your jaws and then spitting it out. No, that is not what you're supposed to do.
With food, that's called an eating disorder. With wine, it's called being rich.
Excellent. Oh, I love that.
Uh, but yeah, so we're talking to them and they're explaining how in the 90s, wine auctions became a really big deal during the dot-com boom. And they don't start to address it right here in the very beginning of the documentary, but as it goes on, it becomes clear that the wine auctions were a thing because it is a largely unregulated industry. And so you can buy and sell whatever, you can use it to shore up your financial investments, to sell things for crazy prices as a money laundering scheme. Like it is designed so that the wealthy can skirt laws and rules and regulations.
Of
That's what the
course.
wine industry is for. And they talk to John Capon, who is the head of the auction house, Acker, Merrill, and Condit.
Mhm.
And that he, in talking to him, he's a big part of this. He was essentially the main auction house where this guy Rudy was counterfeiting his wine through. But when we first meet John, he introduces us to a group called the Angry Men, and
Right.
he explains. Do you remember how he explained they got that name?
Yes, I believe he said that it's like when you go to a dinner, when you're invited to a classy dinner party and you bring the $5,000 bottle of wine, and then you get there and everybody else has brought shitty wine, and then you understandably get angry because they're all going to drink your wonderful expensive wine and you're going to be stuck, drinking the shitty wine. So they all got together, all of these wine snobs, and formed this like Algonquin round table of wine. And That's how that was formed, I believe.
Surprise, surprise, they're all super wealthy white dudes. Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but like we're talking to some of the people that are in these groups, and like one of the guys, Jeff Levy, is a film director and a Hollywood big shot, and he's talking about all the crazy expensive wine that they drink, and that like, and as they're going through the lists of wines and the prices, these guys had fuck you money. Like
Yes.
at one
I
point,
love that term.
at one point, they're talking to a woman named Maureen Downey, who's a wine consultant, and she works kind of, as a wine forensic analyst and some other things. And she talks about just the insane prices that are on these wines, and watching this kind of change hands. And they talk to her about the first time that she meets Rudy, um, because he's bidding on something called a Paulmeyer Merlot, and it's not like a ton of money. It's a relatively low end in this world version of
Right.
Merlot. And he's talking to her about he wants to get into the wine auction scene. How does he do that? And he wants to be a part of this world. So he came into this at the low end with an intention of working his way up the wine auction ladder.
And I just desperately want to put wine forensics analyst somewhere on my resume, like buried among the professor jobs. I want to say that. It's absolutely what a niche job. I mean, that's just fantastic.
It is. And every time I watch a documentary or something educational, I walk away with a new job that if I had known what it was when I was in high school, I would have a different career now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like I watched a whole thing about archaeologists who use satellites to determine, like they do some type of science work and like historical research based on satellite imaging, and they're called space archaeologists. And there is no
Oh,
where I would not have gung ho been a
no,
space archaeologist.
absolutely. Oh my God, yes.
And so yeah, wine
Yeah.
forensic analyst is on that list of things that like, why didn't I know that? I could
Why
do that.
didn't I know this was a thing? Yeah, so Rudy slithers in at the bottom of the ladder and rubs shoulders with, the great wine collectors and other, I'm going to call them winos from now on. Rubs shoulders with the winos and, starts to make a name for himself.
Yeah, and apparently he just had an extraordinary palate. Like he could identify wines better than anybody else just based on their flavor alone. Like this was apparently a unique skill of his. And as much as I truly down deep in my bones believe this is absolutely bullshit, I do also believe that there are people who can detect the differences between the brands and like that sort of thing better than others. Like, I don't think
Mhm.
anybody's going to be fantastic at it, but I think there are probably people who are better at it than everybody else.
Definitely agree with that. People, I mean, I certainly the sense of smell and taste does vary, among people. There was one manager at my store that has the best olfactory sense in the entire store. If there's ever a question, she's the one I call over, and she's right every time. So yeah, it's like a superpower. It really is.
And so Rudy's like getting in there and he's showing people what he can do and like all of his ability to detect these flavors. And he's throwing numbers around. And apparently, he tells somebody he gets $1 million a month in allowance just for wine. That's his wine budget is $1 million a month.
I can't even. I it's just I don't know how to spend $1 million a month on wine. I really, if there was some sort of weird Running Man type contest for this, I would lose. I wouldn't know where to even start. I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's nuts. And then like apparently they talk about how some people, and Rudy is one of them, like to save the labels from the bottles of wine that they drink, and they like to like make little notes on them. And I'm like, oh, removable labels. So we're gonna start to get into the scamming now, are we? But and then they kind of go back and forth and they take us back to Burgundy, France, and they're explaining why wine from Burgundy, France is unique because it's the specific slope of the land and the composition of the soil make it the perfect place to grow grapes for wine, and that they have a unique flavor that really can't be gotten anywhere else.
If you say so. I mean, again, I wouldn't know. I would not know.
Yeah, but this is like the justification for why Burgundy wine is special.
Okay.
And so apparently this is part of the reason why some wine experts are obsessed specifically with Burgundy wines from this Burgundy, France, because it is unique among places in the world of how you would make wine from these grapes. You know what? Whatever. And they're showing us, they're going through people's wine collections and they're showing us their reasonably priced wine at $600 a bottle.
No, nothing that costs $600 is reasonable, except like a 747 maybe. I don't know, but yeah, and it's sort of, I guess, a caveat emptor sort of situation that Rudy was kind of capitalizing on here.
Yeah, oh, very much. And Rudy was obsessed with the Burgundy wines, and they kind of figured out early on, like the people that were surrounding him, that his approach was going to be that he was going to buy up all of the wine from a region, especially with like specific years like 1945 or 1969
Right.
or whatever. He was going to buy up those specific years of wine and take them all off the market so that they would go up in value and then resell them at the higher price. That's what people thought Rudy was doing. And they thought that that
Mhm.
was pretty clever. But yeah, that's not what he ended up doing.
See, I actually was talking to a friend a couple and about an hour ago about this, and he told me that bottles of wine, rare bottles of wine, are very much like collector's item toys. That there's new in box value, and then it depreciates incredibly if the box has been opened, and that's also applies to the world of fancy collectible wines. An intact bottle with the original cork, is worth 10 times more than something that, your alcoholic cousin was chugging down in the basement one night. So I thought that was really interesting too. Rudy certainly knew what side of the bread was buttered for him.
Yeah, and they even one of the people who they were talking to, I forget who it was. I want to say one of the auction house people explained that today in, the 2000s, there's no relation between the price that you pay and what's in the bottle.
Yeah.
It's all based around the year on the label, who made it, like, but if what's inside it could be garbage, and that's not what you're buying. You're not buying the wine in the bottle,
Right,
essentially.
you're buying the prestige of having the bottle. That's all it is. Because 'cause you're not gonna drink it, you just wanna be able to display it, when people that are not as rich as you come to your house, I suppose.
Yeah. And like then they started talking to Bill Koch. And my notes just say fucking Bill Koch, man, buying up wine that was owned by famous people like Thomas Jefferson. Like he's going through his wine collection,
Right.
explaining like this was special because Thomas Jefferson owned it and he held this bottle and that's why I like this one. He's like going around and the whole time I'm like, oh, one of the three evilest men in the country. I get to watch him talk about wine. Fan frickin' tastic.
Oh, yes, and wasn't it like $4 million he spent on counterfeit wine? Was
Yeah.
that it was some astronomical sum. Yeah,
Yeah, he spent more on counterfeit wine than most Americans would make in 3 lifetimes. Like,
right.
just, he had money to burn and was spending it on shit without checking authenticity or anything, just throwing it away. And the $4 million he lost on the counterfeit wine doesn't impact him at all. It's a rounding
No.
error for him.
I just hated this man from the beginning to the end. And I was like, I'm actually quite happy that he got taken.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, I was
deserved it.
excited to see like somebody who's scamming people, but they're scamming people who probably should be scammed. Like that
Yeah.
that was fantastic.
I was like, way to go, Rudy. Gaming system.
Well, and then they kind of explained a little bit about how they can identify fakes. They talked about the weight of the bottle and the age of the packaging and the consistency between the label and the cork, and like going through kind of descriptions of how you know when you're looking at a bottle,
Mm-hmm.
kind of just instinctively whether or not it is fake. And I'm going to believe them because I don't have any clue. Like I could not do that. If you put two bottles of wine in front of me and said, which one of these is fake? I would not know.
No, I wouldn't. I would not either, unless it was really obvious, like the label was made with an inkjet printer, and it's got a 1925 stamp on it. Yeah, I think I would know then. But no, I don't know nearly enough about wine to be able to call that. Absolutely not.
Yeah. But while this is all going on, they've started discovering these counterfeit wines that are popping up. Bill Koch has them, and they like people are reporting that they have these fraudulent bottles, and so they're starting to investigate. And they've asked the John Kaplan to take the bottles off the shelves, and Poinson showed up at the auction and withdrew all of his wines. Said he
Yep.
didn't want anything from his vineyard sold because of this, because they were ruining his reputation.
Absolutely. I could just see him bursting in there, waving his fist, and I take back my wine. And just the fact that this was a scandal. It was a legitimate scandal that
Oh
that
yeah.
that many people were so upset about. And it's like most Americans are living hand to mouth, check to check, and these guys are bitching and complaining about the wine.
Yeah, and so they're starting to build their team of people, and they bring in like a former CIA agent. I promise you, if I walked into a police station or something and I said, "Hey, I've been ripped off for everything that I own, everything that's in my bank account," they would be like, "That's sad for you. Let's file a
Right.
report." And if you figure it
Let's
out,
file a
no.
report. Mhm.
But somebody steals from Bill Koch for money
Mhm.
he's not gonna miss, money that
Right.
really impacts his life, and they're gonna bring in retired
Yeah.
CIA, and they're gonna create,
Yeah. And the FBI got involved. Just
yeah,
unbelievable. And that's when I really lost it watching this. I was like, as soon as the FBI got involved, I'm like, really? Really? This was just so strange. And well, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm listening.
well, and so then as they're doing the tracking down of things, they figured out that a lot of this stuff is coming from Rudy. And so they're talking to him about, where did you get this wine? We need to know who your seller is. And he's like, "Oh, I got it from Indonesia because his family was Chinese but living in Indonesia. That's where he was raised." And so it's like, "No, it's from Indonesia. So here's a phone number for the guy, and here's a name." And the name that he made up for this fake contact
Ah,
is
yeah.
Pak Hendra. And apparently in Indonesia, Pak is just like Mr. And Hendra
Mhm.
is like the Indonesian equivalent of Mr. Smith, is
Yeah. The
essentially what
most
his name
common
was.
last name in Indonesia. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the FBI, not being Indonesian, nobody caught on to this. And I'm sure Rudy thought he was just so clever in coming up with this.
But so they're calling the phone numbers that he gave them and nobody's answering. It turns out one of them's an airline, and
Right.
like,
And a fax machine. The other was a fax machine. Right.
and so Poisson decides he's going to go to Indonesia and he is going to go find this stuff. And he's going around, and I'm sure it wasn't just him, it was probably some of the team that's looking into this. And they can't find anybody who knows Pak Hendra. They can't find anybody who knows Rudy. They can't find
Right.
any connection to anybody here. And so clearly this is not where the wine is coming from. And so they're going through, and they've brought in the FBI, who the guy from the FBI was so funny. His name is James Wynn, and
Right.
he was a counterfeit expert. He was focused on art fraud and, very counterfeit and financial crimes were his kind of his deal. And so he's going through Rudy's finances, and he's going through Rudy's art collection and his car collection and a mansion that he bought. And as he's looking through all of this stuff, they discover he doesn't have a trust fund. Nobody's giving him money. He does not have $1 million a month budget for wine.
For wine, exactly. So where's all that coming from?
That's the
spoiler alert, it's crime.
But yeah, so they're looking and they can't figure anything out, and as they're starting to research, they're finding that Rudy has gone into millions of dollars of debt. He's sending emails to people being like, "Hey, can you give me $3 million to cover some bills? I promise I'll get it back to you next month." And the fact that he lives and exists in a world where you could ask somebody for $3 million is just unfathomable to me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't, yeah. I just, first of all, I don't know anybody I could ask for $3 million from. I mean, oh my God. Unbelievable. Now, was it Rudy's father or uncle that was involved in the bank heist?
It was Rudy's uncle. He had two uncles on his mom's side. And they, as we're digging into this, we find out that they pulled off the largest bank heist in the history of Jakarta. And one of them went to jail and the other one did not. And they've only about 10% of that money was returned or found. So he comes from crime, honestly. Like that.
I told you, spoilers, crime. Yeah. Well, go big or go home, I always say. If you're going to pull off a bank heist in Indonesia, make it count.
And so he's going through all this. They're finding the ties to crime. And then they start talking to some of the other people about the counterfeit bottles. And in the process of this, Christie's, the auction house, very, very famous auction house, starts selling wine from Rudy's collection that was very clearly, obviously counterfeit, misspellings on the labels and whatnot. They did not do their due diligence at all.
I think the thing that really put me over the edge was that the labels were affixed to the bottle with Elmer's glue. He just went to the CVS, to the school supplies aisle, and bought a bottle of Elmer's glue. And that was where I just toasted him. I was like, you go, Rudy. You use those school supplies to commit crime. Oh.
And as they're doing all of this investigation, it turns out that everybody really likes Rudy.
Yeah.
They're talking to his friends, and then his friends call him and are like, "Hey, the FBI was here. They seem to be building a case against you." And he's just like, what are you going to do? So
and Rudy was like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I've got it under control. But no, I mean, if I were one of those buyers, I'd be like, no, Rudy. We need to talk about my wine purchase here because the FBI is telling me that it's worthless. And this is an investment that I made. And I kind of would like my money back now, please. There you go.
But they're digging into all this. They're contacting his friends. And they finally put together enough of a case to be able to raid his house and arrest him. And so they bring the FBI when the battering ram and all the people down to his house. And they bust in and they find wine everywhere. Thousands of bottles of wine all around this house. There are bottles in the sink soaking the labels off. He's got recorking devices and stencils and specialty paper that he's using to make these labels.
Lab. That's all I could think of was like the cops burst in with the battering ram and they found a meth lab only for wine. And I just can't picturing like during the Depression and in the movie The Untouchables and Kevin Costner bursting into the warehouse to find all the liquor. I was just, I couldn't believe that. you know, can you imagine being one of those detectives and thinking to yourself, oh, I'm going to go on a drug bust or something? No, it's just wine for
Well,
great.
and one of the things we learn as they're going through his house, he's got bottles where he's written on the sides of them in like white grease pencil or something. And he's
Mhm.
coming up with the recipes to create a functional copy of the wine that he's selling. Because when he's counterfeiting it, he's not just putting like $2 Chuck in the bottle or like grape juice and being like, here you go. Nobody's ever going to open this. He is legit. He's bought dozens of different kinds of wine and is mixing them together to get a flavor profile that matches what's in the
Mhm.
aged bottles, which is pretty brilliant when you come to think about it. Like that,
Yeah. There
even
was
if
a
you
whole chemistry thing going on there.
Yeah, even if you bought one of these bottles for an insane amount of money and opened it up and tasted it, you wouldn't necessarily be able to taste any difference because he's doing a pretty good chemical match of what's in the
Right.
bottle versus what he is putting together. And he's putting together legitimate wine that was purchased at the store. It's not like
Mhm.
I in oh God, it must have been the 70s or 80s. There was a big deal with Albania in Europe. They were putting antifreeze in the wine to make it sweeter and to make it age, and it was making people go blind. And
I was going to say, and make it toxic and noxious. And wow, I had not heard that. And Albania,
almost,
of all places?
almost certainly it was Albania. It was a like an Eastern European country that had huge, like, wine was their industry. It's what brought money into their country. And for whatever reason, I don't know if there had been a bad crop or if they were trying to stretch what they had or what, but they were putting antifreeze in the wine. And that got the entire industry shut down. That country lost the entire industry because nobody would ever buy anything from
Of
them ever
course
again.
not. Of course not.
Uh,
How horrific.
so Rudy wasn't doing that. He wasn't hurting people. He wasn't like putting fake product in the bottles. It was still wine. It just wasn't the wine that was originally in that bottle.
Right.
And so he's going through this whole thing and they're looking at all of the ways he's done this. And they take him and they put him in a detention center in New York City with no bail because he's a flight risk, obviously. And his lawyer, I thought, made a really excellent argument was that one, he was, trying to fit into this world where he didn't really belong. He just
Mhm.
wanted to fit in, and that he was putting something in the bottle that everybody liked. Nobody who had tasted
More or less.
like
It was actually Austria that had the antifreeze in the wine. I looked it
Austria,
up while you were
not
while
not
you're
Albania,
talking because
Austria.
I didn't think Albania would do anything like that. And no, it was Austria, and it's actually called the Great Austrian Wine Antifreeze Scandal. And I think it's funny because the use of the word "great" indicates that there have been other Austrian anti-wine antifreeze scandal that were not quite as important. But yeah, so yeah, it was Austria.
Austria, not
But no,
Albania.
that's lawyer does have a good point. I mean, yeah, it was misrepresentation, but it was something. It was technically wine, just not it was like bait and switch, really.
Yeah, that's
It,
that's essentially all it was. And that he was doing this on such huge scale. He was selling like 15,000 bottles at a time. This was not a small amount of wine. And so the argument they were making was he could not have done this in his kitchen. That's
hmm.
too large scale to be done in an individual person's kitchen. Not possible. So they're kind of like going back and forth and trying to figure this out. And like 90% of the wine that he sold was real. According to, his friends and the records that they had, he was primarily selling the wine that he had bought previously. And
Hmm.
that the counterfeiting the wine was a separate like income stream that just kind of merged in with this. which is strange because he didn't need to do that. If he was going to buy the wine and sell it at a higher price, like that was the money making. He didn't need to counterfeit the
Right.
wine.
Exactly. Exactly. I think it was a case of one day he just thought of this and said, I wonder if I can get away with it once. And then he did, and like everybody who gets away with something once turns into and it's like what it's the system of random rewards that rewards our limbic system when we go, ooh, I remember this feeling. I want to do this again and again and again. I'm sure it was a rush for him whenever he would get away with it, just like all crime. Sure.
Oh, sure. And I'm willing to bet this came from him going to wine tastings and watching people identify things that were not in the wine, identify flavors that were not there. He's watching people bullshit for clout. And he's like, well, if you're going to
Right.
bullshit for clout, I should make some money off of that. I would almost guarantee.
Exactly. Exactly. I really found it difficult seeing Rudy as the villain in this documentary. I just do for some reason. I mean, like you said earlier, if you're going to sting somebody, sting the people that can afford it. Yeah. If you're going to rip somebody off, go to the top, man, because I could be easily ripped off, but you're not going to get much.
Oh my goodness, yes. And there was a comment in the documentary about a collaboration between a forger and a dupe, and about how the people he was fooling were committed to not being fooled. That he hadn't done anything wrong. They hadn't, they tasted the wine. It was fine. They don't believe that he was counterfeiting because it would make them look dumb to have been tricked by this very obvious forgery.
And I have the distinct feeling that rich wine snobs, are among the top 10 because, they like to think that they're brilliant, especially about the thing that they're allegedly an expert in.
Yeah. And we're seeing some of that now in other places, like especially politically, we're seeing people who are saying that things that they used to hate obviously weren't that bad because what they think now disagrees with that. And rather than saying, so you used to hate Hitler and understood him to be a bad dude, but when everything that he was for now matches the presidential candidate you voted for, now you like Hitler. That's
Yeah.
not the selling point you think it is.
No, it's really not. That's faulty logic. Yeah. Yeah. I'd be like, walk that back for me. You know?
So we're definitely seeing this sort of thing in other places. And I had to laugh so hard because they're showing people trying the wine when they know it's counterfeit. And one guy, with the guy with the BLT with the egg on it, his description said that he could taste the difference because the counterfeit wine was skunky and bad. And I'm like, oh, but you didn't think it was skunky and bad?
No, but you were swilling it down and you thought it was authentic, weren't you? You quit. Yep.
Yeah, it went from nobody could tell the difference. Everybody had been fooled by this to once they know it's counterfeit, now the wine experts can taste the difference. Which,
Oh, yes, of course.
good example of why I think it's largely bullshit.
Yeah. Wouldn't that make a cool game show, though? Try to tell the fake wine from the real thing. I mean, first of all, everybody'd be wasted by the end of every episode. And, there you go. But that would be just so cool to see if, like, is there a placebo effect there? If you think you're drinking a $10,000 bottle of wine and you're really not, but if you think you are you going to have the same psychological reaction to it? Fascinating.
But I would bet that if they did a test where they poured like 6 or 7 little 1 ounce red wine flavors and it all came from the same bottle, but you didn't know it, and you were told it was a bunch of different prices, that people would rank them very differently.
Oh, I'm sure. And I want to try this now, but none of my friends are like that snobbish. I mean, they're just not.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who I could trick with that,
No,
but it sounds fun. It sounds like
it
it's a
does.
gotcha. But when they were going through this whole thing, they were showing how he was mixing the bottles of the cheap wine to create his fakes. And they broke it down that apparently in 1 hour, you can strip a bottle of wine of all of the labels, empty it out, refill it, relabel it, and put in a new cork and
Right.
re-wax it, essentially.
That's so much effort to go through, though. It never fails to amaze me when we do these things about how much time and effort the criminal or whoever is putting into their crime. It's so much easier to just do the thing for real in so many of these cases, you know.
Yeah, when we were talking about Operation Varsity Blues and all of these people,
Yes.
and I was like, this is a lot of effort to go through when you could just hire tutors for your kids.
Study for your fucking test. There you go. That's the answer right there. You don't need what's his face. Like a singer. You don't need Mr. Singer to help you out with that one. Just study for your fucking exam. Pay attention. Take notes. Ah.
They're just like every other thing. There is so much effort that goes into the committing of the crime that if he had just put that effort into like something cool, he could have become a wine forensic analyst and lived in this
Exactly.
world.
Yeah, exactly. Or he could have had, seriously, he could have had a career in any part of the wine industry. He could have founded his own wine company or bought some vineyards legitimately and hired vintners and winemakers and, become a respected part of the whole scene because it's apparently a really lucrative scene, like you said. And he could have been on a board of directors or something, but no, now he's wasting away in prison for 10 years.
Well, and he was a young, good-looking dude who was very personable. Everybody loved him. If he
Very charming, sure.
if he had stayed in this industry long enough to meet a woman and marry her, he could have lived this life forever on someone else's dime.
There you go. But no, he got his Elmer's glue and went to town.
Had to be crime.
I do think 10 years is a bit excessive for what he did, to
Yeah,
be
like
honest.
I feel like the 10-year crime, the 10-year sentence is because he ripped off rich people. The
Oh, that's very true. Yes. And I know that he has to pay restitution to all of the people who he, conned, which is absolutely 100% what he should have to do. But I really don't think 10 years in a federal penitentiary is really warranted in this situation. Um,
really, I don't
but
see
yeah, like
the
you said, he was conning wealthy people. So
yeah, the punishment tends to be bigger when you con wealthy people. That was the whole
mhm,
deal with Martin Shkreli, was they were ripping off poor people by the thousands. And when he
right.
turned that same scheme around and ripped off rich people, he's still in jail.
Hmm.
That is
Well, it's like that whole rich people protect each other. And Rudy did not fit that mold. He looked at everybody as a mark. So I'm
and
sure they felt betrayed, you know.
oh, they had to. And they also
Mhm.
probably felt stupid. Like they
Yeah.
didn't want to be made to look like idiots in the public eye or to their friends. They didn't want to pull out a bottle at a party and have somebody be like, "Oh, that's a counterfeit bottle. Did you not know?" Um,
Right, exactly. Pointing and laughing. Well, of course, like I said, nobody wants to admit being taken for a ride, and nobody wants to be embarrassed in front of their, fat white rich friends. I get the logic. I get what Rudy was playing on in other people. And he was, like you said, he was a smart, personable man. He could have gone so far in the wine industry, or really anything that he put his mind to, I think. He was certainly, brilliant enough to do that. But no, he, just his ego got a hold of him. The hubris just overcame him. And he ended up in prison because of
yeah.
wine. Can you imagine his cellie asking him, well, I'm here because I cut off my girlfriend's scalp with a chainsaw and ate her brains. What are you here for? Wine fraud. I mean, that's not going to go down well on the yard.
I don't know. He could maybe sell himself as a hero who duped a bunch of billionaires.
Okay, that's true. He could ride those coattails for a while.
But he better hope that he's got a cellmate who was like smuggling fruit or something because
So he could continue his enterprise, just making, sell wine. Oh God, because I know what goes into that sort of stuff. There you go. He will be the wine guy. You know, got the tattoo guy in prison. He's the wine guy.
yeah.
Great.
And along with his 10 years in jail, he was also told he had to pay back the $28.4 million to the people he cheated,
Yep.
which I think he probably made a lot more than $28.4 million. And they even said that at this point, there are still like 10,000 bottles at least that they believe were counterfeit and are in people's personal collections and have not been recovered because
Oh,
people
sure.
don't want you to know that they got scammed.
Right,
So,
right.
so they're just going to hide it in with their wine and not let anybody know.
Right. They're just gonna like keep their traps shut or throw it away or snug muggle it. Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that. But I don't know. I'd freely admit to being conned if it meant I would get millions of dollars. Sure. Take me for a dupe. Absolutely. I'm dumb. I'll fall for your scheme. Of course.
Yeah. And then Poinceau, who he had like a whole news story done about him. He was referred to as the Sherlock Holmes of French wine because he left his vineyard where he had spent his entire life, all of his family history. He left that in the hands of his employees and traveled the world, the United States and Indonesia and kind of all over to figure out who was faking wine with his family's name on it.
What a weird odyssey. But I mean, I do understand that's also French culture. You slur somebody's name, that's not good. Yes, and especially because he was obviously so proud of his wine and, of his family's vineyards and I could really tell that he loved wine, not as in like a wino, but he loved wine. The first thing he says in the documentary is the wine is alive. It's not like the television set or this, that, or these other, or your car, the wine is alive. And I was like, that is a really interesting way to look at wine. But when you think about the things that you do that you love, I mean, I would love to think that my writing is alive because I do put my heart and soul and tears, into it. It's not physical like being a vintner, but I think it's the same sort of look what I made. Look at this. I created this with my hands and my brain and everything. So I think he really had a passion for it.
Yep. And some things, like I can really understand where some of the historical wine that from specific years or that had been owned by specific people, I can understand the appeal of that. Like I do not drink at all. I think the taste of alcohol is pretty vile in almost every
Mm,
form. I've never had alcohol where I was like, "Oh, that's good." But
right.
like
Me either, really.
like 8 or 10 years ago, there's a beer company or a lager company called Ancient Ales, or that created a line called Ancient Ales, and they took like 10,000, 11,000 year old recipes for beer from various places around the world and brewed it in modern, facilities and
Right.
sold it in bottles. And I am a history nut. Like that, my mind in
Right.
college was history. I love all the historical things. I want to know how it all fits together. And I really kind of went back and forth about, do I go buy one bottle of each of the versions of this beer and I'm gonna take a teaspoon of it to see how it tastes and then throw the rest away because it's all gonna taste awful. It's gonna taste like
Oh, yeah.
if bread had feet. That's what it's gonna taste like. And
Oh,
I just
wow. Beautiful.
not interested in that. But I want to know the historical end of it. Like that seems so fascinating to me. But but yeah, as far as it goes, like I don't know that anybody, like they all have such appreciation for the wine. Clearly this is important to everybody in this industry, and for some
Sure.
people it's clout, but for
Of course.
Pousseau it was that he loved it. It was his heart, his soul, his family. It was everything to him.
Right.
And so I understand saying I have to take a year and travel the globe like I'm freaking trying to catch Carmen Sandiego.
Looking for Waldo, And I'm imagining, can you imagine how weird it would be if there's a knock on your door and it's this French dude who wants this bottle of wine that you have, and you're like, what? All right, here. And then he disappears with it into the night, It's that would be just so strange.
Yeah, they talked about how at the end of all of this, John Capon had to refund a ton of bottles that were forged, and he ended up shelling out a bunch of money to make it right for buyers. And that all of the fake wine, literally all of it that they were able to get their hands on and take back, they destroyed it at a facility in Texas. And you're
Hmm.
watching them throw probably what, 75, 100,000 bottles of wine into
Right.
crushing machines and just draining all of this wine. And the whole time I'm like, well, it's counterfeit for that bottle, but it's still wine.
And this could actually work. You could have, this bottle of wine was one of those, actually play it up for what it really is. That big wine scandal back, this is one of those. I would totally buy that bottle of wine just to like display as something stupid that happened.
Oh, for sure. They could have sold each of those at like $20 as collector's items as part of this larger scheme. They would have sold every one of them. And if
Oh
they
yeah.
sold them for $600 or $700 a bottle just for people to have on display of look at my counterfeit wine, wealthy people would have bought it in droves.
Oh yeah.
But they destroyed every bit of it, which felt wasteful. But I also get why they destroyed it because they didn't want to like play up the counterfeiting as good. You shouldn't have.
Right. Yeah.
But it's still hard from like an environmental perspective to see all of this wine that had been created and all of these bottles and everything and just watch it all get crushed down into nothing.
Yeah, I know.
But at the very end of the documentary, like the last sentence or two of the documentary, was the FBI agent, John Wynn, pointed out that he thinks this is an excellent example of the importance of regulating an industry. When you have
Yeah.
something that's largely unregulated, it invites this type of activity. And if it's unregulated, that means it's used for money laundering. Counterfeiting is going to happen. It's just the way it's going to go. And
Sure.
when you push to deregulate things or to not regulate things, you're opening those industries for abuse and for theft and for counterfeiting and all of this. And the real value that comes from regulating an industry is it protects all of us, even the richest among us.
Yeah, absolutely. We all are, we all deserve the same laws of protection. I was surprised that the ATF didn't get involved in this, considering it was, alcohol. And that they left it to the FBI because, well, that would be fraud. That is the FBI's jurisdiction. So, there was a little
I
bit of each, I guess.
I can just imagine like one person from every government industry sitting around a table being like, all right,
Right.
rock, paper, scissors for who gets this one.
Right. And then we'll do last man standing with one potato chip. God, that's great. Yep.
Yeah, and the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking about like you said, Frasier and Niles and kind of that whole there are people for whom they love this and they build part of their personality off of their love of wine and their ability to taste the different, functions of the wine and the notes and flavors of things. And I cannot imagine how upsetting that would be.
Absolutely. But, they're showing off for their friends. I mean, obviously, they all really do enjoy wine, from an intellectual as well, as well as a chef, a palate thing. Um, and they've been fooled now, and they're thinking, well, is anybody else in the wine industry ever going to trust my opinion again? Like wine critics that write columns about wine in newspapers and magazines, are they now disgraced because they couldn't tell the difference between a fake wine and the real thing? So it does affect people down the line. As much as we're laughing at the whole concept, a lot of people have wine based careers that are possibly now compromised because they've been pointed out as a dupe, a mark.
Well, and this just touches the edge of this ultra wealthy people being scammed because they're too rich for their own good. I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe that when you go to a Michelin star restaurant and they're like, here's this flavored foam, it's $26. Have this plate of flavored foam. And you're like, that was a bite and a half and it tasted like shaving cream, but I have to
Right.
take it because it was very expensive.
Started that with a Cool Whip container, just like, yeah, of course.
So I feel like there are entire industries built on selling you things that make you feel special because you're rich. And
Right.
that they have created a valueless thing or something that's very low value that they have convinced you has a lot of worth.
Right.
And this is just one point in this world where people are maybe being taken because they have this kind of money.
Amazing. I really enjoyed this week. I really, really did. And I didn't even work Hugh Jackman into it. So he would not be fooled by fake wine.
Well, Hugh Jackman also does not strike me as the kind of dude who's got like $10,000 bottles of wine sitting in the back of his
No,
wine.
no, I don't think so either.
So he seems lovely and down to earth and wonderful. My guess is he drinks the Ryan Reynolds vodka line or whatever, and that's probably
Ryan Reynolds vodka line, right? That would be great.
But thanks for listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with your hosts, Rachael and Roxanne. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the importance of regulation and the documentary Sour Grapes. Join us again next week for a glimpse into another financial problem and a documentary all about it. If you enjoyed our show today, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave us a review on your podcast app. Thanks for listening. See you again next week.
Bye for now.